It's going live. Jimmy and I are trying a couple of new things, man, and here we go. My name's Ed Piskor.
I'm Jim Rugg.
Jimmy, what day is it?
April 24, 2020.
We have a lot of stuff to talk about, man. We had such a big recording day yesterday that we couldn't do our typical record session.
Yeah, in case anyone's worried about us that we're recording remotely, we're okay. We're just overbooked.
Yeah, man. I don't know that you got around to seeing West Wing yet, but I don't know if this is kayfabe to the show or if this is a thing that happens in real life. In fact, maybe you know, anecdotally or whatever. But whenever they do a State of the Union address, there's always like one guy, like the Secretary of Agriculture, has to hang out in the Oval Office just in case, wherever that State of the Union is being held, just in case everybody meets a terrible demise. Like, you know, the Secretary of Agriculture is going to have to restart the United States government. You ever hear of
Yes,
this?
the 104th person in line for succession. Yeah, you know where you hear about it, Ed? 80s black and white comics.
Really?
About every third dystopian comic, this is the what's going on in the Oval Office in those books.
And that's the douchebag who becomes president and where everything gets to be the way it is.
Yeah, in books like New Beginning would be a title for that.
Yes, I believe New Beginning. Is that the one with the animal gimmicks?
No,
With the bear?
I think that's New Generation.
Ah, yes, of course.
It'd be funny to rattle off all of these, like the generic two-word titles. First Kingdom. And
you know what the worst one is, man? We were going over the comics in the grab bag yesterday. Just this has no iambic pentameter or any of that, man. It doesn't cohere very well, man. But Force Works. What the fuck is that, man?
That's such a generic title.
The worst.
It's awful. It's post X-Force, but the works part, not a very dynamic word to pair up with it.
Right. It's almost like the product of focus group type shit, man. And they got some weird skewed data.
Did Kayfabe and Nisa create Force Works? That feels like his handiwork.
I wouldn't be the least bit surprised, Jimmy. Man, so there's a lot of stuff for us to talk about. You know, one thing that I want to do, because we're trying something new here, man. We've got some new technology. I actually got a good mic, so hopefully I sound good over the stream. You got a good mic. We conducted a shoot interview yesterday that is our best produced one yet, and I want to tax this software a little bit and get a little bit more out of the materials we have, man. Where was I going with that? Oh, but the one thing, like, you know, we're putting in mad work here. So I'm actually going to call out to the kayfabers, man. A lot of these dudes are drawing crazy pictures of us anyhow, right?
That is true.
So we've been having pretty generic, for the weekly shoots, we've been having pretty generic album art. So I want to put it out to the kayfabers, man, to like draw some Eddie P. Jim Rugg thumbnail art for our YouTube videos. And the stuff that we use in subsequent weeks, we'll make sure to give the artist credit at the tippity top of the description, man. Links to whatever they want, man, their Instagrams or any of that stuff. The mentions to the kayfabers out there. Jeff Manley, sharpen your pencils, motherfucker. The dimensions, 1280 pixels by 720. I have two rules, man. This is something we came up with on the fly, so you might have a rule or two as well that you want to inject in there. One rule is don't add any numbers to the thing. Like, you know what I mean? Don't try to anticipate that this would be for Kayfabe Weekly Shoot 63 or something like that. It would be nice to have some of these at our disposal that we could put up, man. So don't include any numbers. And for the love of God, don't include any coronavirus drawings. I just don't want to see it. I'm fucking sick of looking at it. It's an ugly image. I just don't want to think about it. So even if you're being cute drawing us fighting it or some bullshit like that, I just don't want it.
Yeah, those rules all sound good to me. Make sense to me, Ed. I would say motorcycles are always awesome on a piece of comics art. So
So in the
gorillas are popular. Gorillas on a cover, that moves some product. So
that's what they say, man. And you know what? We're not bound by copyrights with this shit, man. So, draw your Spider-Mans in there or whatnot.
We'll find out what we're bound by.
Oh yeah, I just thought of another rule, man. You got to make us look cool.
That's,
That should go without saying.
that should go without saying.
Can we debrief Howard Chaykin a little bit, Jimmy?
Yeah, I have a couple of notes on him. What are your thoughts there, Ed?
Freaking loved it. Great talker. A mixture, my friend, of East Coast and West Coast patois. You hear how many times he called us babe? That's some Hollywood shit.
He's great, a great talker. And one thing, Ed, that I want to say right off the top of the bat is we didn't talk Hey Kids comics quite enough, because you talk to these guys, 50 years he has making comics. Like, what are you going to do? That could be its own YouTube series, is just him talking about that history. But Hey Kids comics is the kind of a perfect vehicle for him, because it's anecdotes about comics history. And like, he's the guy. He talks to everybody. As soon as that video went up, all you see are a bunch of comments all over the place, either linking to it or on YouTube, telling a story about some experience running into Howard Chaykin and him dropping stories on a person, whether you're a fan or another creator or whatever. And that was our experience bumping into him, like we met him at Baltimore, and it was like we'd known him for 20 years. So not too many cartoonists have that sort of outgoing personality and ability to just light up the room and bring everybody in. So he's the perfect guy to be relaying these kind of comics anecdotes, because I'm sure he has heard several lifetimes worth in his travels.
He has mad charisma, man. Like right at the beginning,
Yes,
when he's like, "I miss you guys." No, you don't. No, you don't. But you know what? He really made
Hey,
me feel
shut
like
up,
he did.
man. I felt special there.
Me too,
You're
man.
bursting my bubble.
Me too. That's what I'm saying. He's got the magic, dude. He's got the magic touch.
Yeah, it was great talking to him for sure. I have a question, Ed, that's been bothering me since we did speak to him, because we did a video on American Flag #1, which I've talked to a lot of people about. That's a really influential book in my world. And people I talk to, it seems like they feel the same way. And when we brought it up to him, man, he acted like that book didn't sell or whatever. You think he's kayfabing that a little bit? I mean, it was around for 5 or 6 years and multiple series. Like, it had to sell a little bit. And people had, again, from all the comments and feedback, everybody knows that book, right?
Yeah,
That guy's being a little humble, maybe.
yeah, I think you're onto something, man. Because how many issues were there? 50.
At least. And then a subsequent series, it's been collected, it's gone through some different publishers. Like, that's a big book. I wonder if, he shared that studio for a while with Frank Miller.
Yeah.
That's a tough bunch of numbers to compare to. Like, everybody's going to lose compared to Dark Knight in 1986, but American Flag seems like a book that a lot of people knew about and pulled from.
I mean, you just said it. You just said it, man. It's that comparison is the thief of joy or whatever the fuck, man. Like, if you're sitting around a bunch of dudes that are selling crazy big numbers, man, like, and you compare your 100,000 to that, it might make you semi-salty or something like that. He didn't seem bitter or any of that shit, man, but I'm sure it did just well. And he said he had some franchise with the movie industry on the strength of that book, man. That's one of the amazing things about comics that when I was getting into the game that I really never thought about, and it is the simple fact that each magazine, each unit, to use a gross term, really is a business card, and you have no idea who the fuck is going to get their hands on that thing. Now you multiply that by the 10, 15, 20, 100,000 of those business cards you have out there in the wild. Law of averages says that somebody cool and somebody important and some gatekeeper, tastemaker, somebody who could give you a cool opportunity is going to get their hands on that book and create a new situation for you, man. So he, he's kicking it with us, man. He's got no complaints.
Yeah, it is nice to see him seemingly in a good spot. You hear so many horror stories about cartoonists, and seems like a guy with a good head on his shoulders that is in a good place. So that felt good to see and to experience and talk with. And to your point about the business card thing, whatever your latest book is your new business card. When I was doing a lot more freelance illustration and design, I would always ask whenever I would get a cold call from somebody where they found my stuff, because I was running things on portfolio sites, going through various like annuals and things like that. What's relatively common in a freelance illustration practice. And I never, it was always some book of mine is how somebody found me. It was never through one of those other sources. So it's definitely, I think, has a, I don't know, a longer shadow or bigger footprint or whatever the appropriate expression is. The books carry a lot of weight. And, you know, whenever you're like an illustration student or something, you talk about doing mailers and sending those out to art directors and editors. And it's always like, try to figure out some gimmick in your mailer that keeps it from being a postcard that goes from the mailbox into the trash. You know, you need to sit on that guy's desk. And that's what's better than a book, you know, especially a book full of pictures that I drew. So I think the analogy in terms of a business card or a postcard is right. And certainly anecdotally, I can tell you personally, that's been my experience.
All this postcard talk is sending triggers into my brain, man. Back to 2008, whenever it was like the last time I was making postcards, and the cost reward benefits were very, very slight, man. On the postcard, man, it was like I would get maybe 500, 1,000 of those things, send them all out. You would go to the Barnes and Noble, get that artist market book, and that artist market book is kayfabe, because many of the entries in there are still it's going to the same place. So like there'll be entries for like 8 or 10 publications that like Larry Flint would to name one of the people who got in touch, you know what I'm saying? And it wasn't Larry himself, it was the art director, but it would be like Nugget magazine, Big Brother magazine, Barely Legal magazine, Hustler magazine, like all of those things. And you know, so that felt cheap. That it's like, man, I got this book and it's super thick, and you really feel like you got your hands on, you know, some sacred tablet, some super secret gimmick, but how many of those things were published? You know what I'm saying, man?
It is. I did not expect this conversation to go this direction, Ed, but you are bringing stuff up because 2008 was, you know, the one of our market crashes,
Mm-hmm.
and I lost a lot of work. I lost 2 big jobs back then, and I literally went to I think I went to a Borders that happened to be close to my house at the time for that exact purpose. Like I wasn't even buying that artist market book. I was going there in their coffee shop and just copying down information for like 3 days to try to scrounge up some work, man. It was that's pounding the pavement back in that era.
When that was going down, man, that was when I was working on probably the this third quarter of WYSIWYG, and it was suitable enough material to have an agent. And at that point, I had 2 self-published volumes out. And personally, I was doing, you know, I was doing fine, man, with the self-published thing. But you want to take it to that next level. It got to the point where I was selling enough copies that it was taking up all of my time. Like all day was spent fulfilling orders, and then all night was spent working on the comic. Quality problems, right? But the
living the dream.
But and a lot of that is on the strength of being able to get an article in Wired magazine. That was huge, and then also Boing Boing supported it. But the agent put the book up for auction, which is it's a gamble, because you're betting on several publishers being interested and then bidding upwards, man. That's how you make it in this capitalist system that we all kind of are trying to survive under, man. If you get 2 major players to find value in you and bet upward, that's how you get those crazy advances. And beyond the obvious, when you get those big advances, is the you know, that's immediate money that they put out, which means they're gonna have a vested interest in promoting your work and all of that, man. So that was the gamble that the agent played, and it was like, all right, the auction's gonna be held on this day, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna stay up real late the night before so that I wake up late and then have like a good cool voicemail or some shit, And then like I got that voice, or he had called me kind of voicemail or something, hit him up, and just from the tone of the voice, it's like, damn, like nobody bought that shit, man. And it was, it was 2008. It was we played around for too long, and that was the gamble that we made, man.
There's definitely cycles because that was following like the '05, '06. Whenever there was that little boom in graphic novels, and a bunch of people were buying and publishing graphic novels that maybe didn't know exactly what they were doing. And there were some big advances handed out for about a year and a half.
Yeah.
And then there was some fallout.
So I can't complain because I was a part of that with Harvey Pekar. I benefited from that shit, man, and probably contributed to the demise of that in some way because the works that I did with Harvey Pekar, it was a great school of cartooning for me. It was a great kind of boot camp of getting the work done, but it's not his best comics. He would admit that, I think. It's atypical to the work that he did. And it's not, I super appreciative he gave me the chance, man. I got to grind out my first 200-300 professional pages with him, get those out of my system so that I could go on and do my own thing, man. But I don't want to take this conversation too negative because I'm not of that mindset anymore, man. In fact, during the Howard Chaykin piece, Kayfabers, man, you in that video would have seen me at my most uncomfortable whenever he gave me that compliment about X-Men. And because I don't know what to do with that. I would much rather get some good constructive criticism like that I could apply, but it took me a very long time. Honest to goodness, dude, I remember the year 2012, New Year's, my resolution was I'm going to accept compliments. If people say they like something, I'm not going to point out the deficiencies in the shit of mine that they say they like. And that sounds like a no-brainer, but that just wasn't my standard operating procedure. And it wasn't 2012. It was like 2009 when I made that change.
You say that is a that's a no that should be a no-brainer or whatever, and I agree it should be, but it is almost universally the opposite in comics. I don't know how many times I've been at a convention and I've probably said it myself because I you see this happen around you. People defer these comments, or if you compliment me, I have to then point out why you're wrong and I'm shitty. And it's like, you see it happen and then you sort of realize like, I can't behave that way. But it is really, it was very common practice whenever I was coming through, small press ranks and indie shows and stuff. That was just like the way it worked. And it's a very unattractive thing to see. And then if you consider the person who's on the other side of the table, that's like, I love this person's book. I'm meeting them. This is so exciting. And then the person takes your compliment and turns it around like you're an idiot for liking. Yeah, it's a weird behavior, but a lot of us do it. And it is something to be aware of. I know that there are cartoonists out there that watch us, and think about that the next time somebody pays you that compliment, because they're there because they like what they see. Don't tell them they're wrong for that. Even if you disagree with them, don't tell them that. Why take away that joy?
I'm glad you took that thread and ran with it, Jimmy, because I was really leading you someplace. And the place that I'm leading you is that I'm curious if you saw the Jim Woodring documentary.
I have not watched it, no. I'll tell you what, man. That one and the Steve Rude one have been kind of like floating in front of me, and cartoonist documentaries worry me a little bit. I remember talking, I think it was with you once, about reading new Chris Ware and being like, wait till springtime, wait till the sun's shining to read that. And I kind of feel that way about cartoonist documentaries. But am I to assume that you've seen this Jim Woodring documentary?
Yes, but I couldn't get through it for probably the reasons that you could imagine, and sort of like the things that we just talked about in some ways. The good is just, you get to see him work. You get to see that pencil touch paper and see marks get made, and see little hints of the he has this bookshelf of moleskins, like the little ones, hundreds, and he's like, yeah, this is about 10 years worth, and it's, there might be 50 on a shelf, and there's like 5-6 shelves going down. It's those little ones completely filled up.
Wow.
And whenever he's starved for an idea, he'll just like go through the old ones and just like look through stuff and then make big drawings or whatever. So
That's fascinating. Makes me
any
want to watch it.
any of that shit is so freaking cool. But the great reminder that I got from the documentary was it is my far past subscribing to like that first generation Fantagraphics cartoonist mentality. Essentially everybody sans the Hernandez bros because they were never really navel gazer type, woe is me type characters. You know, they hit that ground running early, man. But that self effacement of certainly Chris Ware and Burns and Clowes and in interviews and shit. I think it damaged a generation of cartoonists. Like some of the people that you were even mentioned, like at the conventions and shit like that. It's like they read maybe too many of those interviews and took too many of those interviews for gospel. And this hasn't been my mentality for many years, dude. Like I said, 2009, I started taking those compliments and just like accepting that, and then allowing the positive vibes to wash over me or whatever, man. And since then, I've had my own successes. You know, I'm not a bottom carder. I'm not an opener. I'm not a first match. I'm somewhere in between, man. So I have no complaints, you know. But there is a little psychic vampirism in the documentary. A little of that saltiness, man. That for a dude who sort of knows that behavior and it certainly has exhibited it in the past, man. You could read old interviews that I did, man, where I'm saying all that stuff, talking about all the holes in the work or whatever. It wasn't good, so I had just had to shut it off, you know. Like I'm sure it's a good flick, and I liked a lot of it, man, but it was kind of like too close to home. Sort of like you said, man, getting nervous about watching the Cartoonist documentary. I don't have the wisdom that you have. Probably it's because you're 40 years old and I'm not there yet.
Yeah, I'm in the midst of finals or gearing up for the class that I teach, and so it involves a lot of one-on-one conversations, critiques, reflecting on the year and things. And one of the things that I always say is like, the goal is to be objective, right? And so some of it is looking at the work and saying, I got to get better at this, or clearly this is a weak spot. But objective is about balance. And it's like, if your plan is to be a professional or that this is your career, you also have to be conscious of what you can do, where your strengths are, what you're selling. And so like truly being objective is being honest about what's working as well. And that's the thing, like there is some kind of like self-flagellation. We'll all accept that. That's how you're supposed to behave. But I don't know who started that. I don't know why that's, I don't know if that just comes from going through art critiques and, especially when you're starting out and your stuff isn't very good. But at some point, like you need to recognize like, this is what I'm good at. And I'm going to put this in the front of the portfolio or on the cover of the book. If you never do it, like, I don't know, it's equally dishonest as if you were walking around being like, I'm great, I'm the best thing ever, like we would all shit all over that, but it's the same deal. It's just you're applying the dishonesty in opposite directions, and one way we accept and one way we don't, and it doesn't make sense. Like either be objective or don't. And of course you can't truly be objective about your own work, but I mean, it's something I think is valuable to at least pursue.
I remember in old Klaus interview, he was talking about. I'm not sure. Did Klaus have anything in Weirdo magazine? Maybe one or two pieces.
I don't know.
He was definitely around that era and bumped into Crumb at a certain point, and Crumb was trying to like dissuade Klaus from continuing in comics, and was just like, it's. Everybody's a scumbag, blah, blah, blah. The publishers are all bad. And who was it that made
one more parallel to wrestling?
Who was it that made the Ghost World movie and, Art School Confidential, but Terry Zwigoff, Crumb's homeboy and bandmate. So Klaus sort of like bounces the stuff that Crumb said to him off of Zwigoff. And Zwigoff was just like, oh, he was just trying to get you to quit. And like that, those guys, man, like, the like my some of those Fantagraphics forefather type cartoonists, man, who would be that kind of self-effacing and shit. I feel like that was their brand of kayfabe for the up and comers, man, whether intentional or not, because those people that are just a little bit younger than them, they all suffer from it. Like, there isn't an immediate generation like right after them, if you think about it, of like major contenders. You know what I'm saying? Ed Brubaker had to go to freaking Marvel to like get his confidence up and shit like that. But you meet those guys, and they all are like, when they started to talk about navel gazing comics, it was like that generation, the people that are like a little older than you, like 5 years older than you or something. And it's from reading those interviews, and the common thing that they would say would be, well, if Chris Ware doesn't like his work, why the hell should I like mine? So it's like, if that was genius kayfabe on their part, it worked.
Yeah, I don't know that it's as intentional as that. Like, in my mind, those guys all had a certain persona that they put out there.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it was influenced by the previous generation, right? Like, everybody that starts making comics, we start out imitating somebody. And then you keep doing it, and you sort of drop some of that, and you get other influences, and you figure out what you like and who you are. And you become a little bit of more whatever you become. It takes time. Like, people that start out rarely have that originality, especially if they're young. So that generation, if they're coming after the undergrounds and after, I don't know, Art Spiegelman and Robert Crumb and some of these big guys from that previous generation, they probably start out following those guys, and those guys aren't exactly like boisterous, outgoing personality types, so it probably affected that generation, the Chris Wares, the Dan Clowes, that would have been a starting point for them. And then they evolve a little bit into themselves and what they become. And then, our generation, are a little bit older than us, follows them, and that's their starting point, and then they go off and become whatever they become. But I don't know that it was some insidious plan to make the next generation quit. Although, I don't know, this is kind of an interesting topic, because that specific generation is so precise. Like, their level of craft is so absurdly high. It does seem like they were responding to something, like they were driven in a way that, I don't know, another cartoonist generation that's driven to that level of craft. And I'm speaking of, Clowes and Burns and Ware, Jim Woodring, you could put in there, just in terms of inking, like, yeah, the craft that is on display in all of their drawings. I don't know that any other generation has that level of craft. So something drove that. I don't know what. That's for somebody else to research, but there probably is some commonality. Like, those guys are of a similar age, and they do exhibit that incredible craft. So the late 70s, early 80s was one of the worst economic recessions in our history, maybe the worst one after the Depression, and worse than like 2008. We may be facing another one of those things now. So maybe 25 years from now, we'll have another great generation of inkers. But, like, there are probably some external factors too that have nothing to do with comics that influenced their development and their values, what drove them to get to that level. I mean, the industry itself, like all the changes in the industry history, when you think of like, you had these paths, right? You had a million publishers that just went away. What are they left with? Like, if they're fighting for like alternative newspaper placements or something, like, it's this whole different landscape. So who knows what drives a generation to develop that skill set, but you could probably do some research and guess.
Regardless, those comics that those people make, I absolutely do love, man. So that goes without saying, and I appreciate their type A mentality. But I wonder, Jimmy, can we jump to some other type A mentalities and talk about a couple of documentaries that we've both watched over the past couple of weeks? One was a couple of weeks ago that I've been meaning to bring up for quite a while, and I hope it still is in toward your frontal lobes, man.
We'll see, man. A lot has gone through the brain since then, but
SNL documentary. The James Franco thesis piece that he did as a student at NYU, had to turn that thing in, and I'm not sure, kayfabers, how you can even find this thing. I've been sitting on it for a long time. Somebody sent it to me, man. Eddie P's got the connections. But to me, it's the greatest piece of work that James Franco ever did. And the conceit of the documentary. And, if you were on the pirate channels, good luck. Type in James Franco Saturday Night. I bet you'll get every appearance that he ever had on Saturday Night Live in the Google searches that come back. But what the conceit of the documentary is It's just him following along for a week, the construction of a single episode of Saturday Night Live. This time it wasn't Franco who was the host, but it was a John Malkovich episode. I forget from which year, but some of the writers involved and cast members. It was Bill Hader, Fred Armisen, Seth Meyers was a writer on the staff. That fat dude with the glasses who's there now, like who nobody can remember his name. It was his like 11th show or something. What do you think, man?
The audio, the sound for it, I hated real bad. I almost shut it off. I hated it so much.
Yeah.
Beyond that, Malkovich is amazing and committed and was great. Bill Hader, I love. It's interesting to see how an episode is put together. And so the big takeaway I had is just watching the nuts and bolts of it as they crafted like which skits were going to go forward. And then they start to coordinate that with production. And I never think about that part of it. You know, like in my mind, it's like, it's sort of this improv model with some scripting. Like you should be able to write whatever you want. When you add in like the production side, it becomes a whole new ball game. And for some reason, that's not something I considered that much until you start to see them like ordering sets and building things in a day or two. That's pretty amazing. Like the amount of organization that goes into that and kind of the way they stream through putting an episode together, especially since every episode features a different star whose commitment and interaction is completely different, I'm sure, from person to person. It's wrangling cats. The writing process they follow very closely, and that part's fascinating. Of course, you know, you see these people working all hours of the night, sleeping for an hour sometimes, and then going into the pitch meeting the next day with whatever they've come up with. And I've heard other people talk about that. I believe the writing cast for news radio, like the showrunner, had them work that way, where it was like really sleep deprived. And at that point you start generating material, and some people, you know, everybody works differently. I don't know that's the way you would have to do something like that. Although who the hell am I to say that? Like, I don't know anything, but watching it, man, I know, like I had this sense of anxiety watching it where it's like, I don't know how somebody could be on that show as a writer for multiple years. Right? Like, did you feel the anxiety watching some of that where it's like, man, they're pitching stuff that's getting thrown out, but they're working all night on it, and it's getting thrown out in 10 seconds halfway around the room, and it's just gone. It seemed, I don't know, man. I'm sure it's a certain type of personality that can thrive in that environment, and getting a glimpse of it was certainly fascinating, but wow, that is a different world.
So let me ask you this, man. Osamu Tezuka documentary, do you find it inspiring or not? Because I think it's inspiring as fuck, but I show it to people and it's depressing to a lot of people, and I don't see that. But how do you feel about it, man? Because I actually found the SNL stuff, especially that kind of like pressure cooker, I found that to be inspiring. To me, it was like, it's mangaka energy, man.
I agree with you. And it's just not what I want out of life. I think that's, you know, I think it probably varies for everybody. It just depends what you're pursuing and when, and who knows. If you ask me this at a different time in my life, I may have a different answer, and vice versa. So I can see either side of that, but man, it's not where I'd want to be right now.
If we were in the NWA, I'd be going for that title belt. I would travel with it, man. I got that energy for that types of shit. But you know, I read, and when I say read, listen to the audiobook for that Saturday Night Live oral history. Mm-hmm. And Larry David tells a story about when he was a writer for Saturday Night Live. He was there during like those bad years with Dick Ebersol was the guy, and he worked, you know, pretty late into like a Friday or something, man. But he got all of his work done, and he was like leaving for the day, had to walk past Dick Ebersol, and Ebersol's like, "What are you doing?" And Larry David's like, "Well, I'm going home, man. I wrote 6 skits. You know, I did this, I did that. I punched up this guy's stuff, man. I'm done." And he said something. You know, Ebersol said something like, "You know, we stay up all night here." And Larry David's like, "What are you talking about?" "No, I don't." And they got into a little fight. eventually Larry David just says, "Fuck you, I quit," leaves, and then realizes like the money he left on the table. And he actually said that his neighbor is Kramer, was a dude named Kramer, and was like, well, just go in on Monday, like nothing happened. And he said that's what he did, and like he just fit right back in. So it's like it's their own kind of like Wizard of Oz kind of kayfabe that they run over there, man. To just like try to like tax your limits completely or something.
I can understand that too. And it's a youthful, it's often a youthful cast and writers. And you'll see those people often move on after maybe a decade, which again is amazing to me that they last that long. But you don't see a bunch of like 60-year-olds in their writing room.
Yeah.
And I think that youthful energy is part of it. Like I used to do all-nighters, and there's a juice to that. And you can certainly get used to it, but not what I want to do now. So, different reaction. Some stuff I'd recommend, Ed, further listening, I guess. There's a This American Life episode, and it is set in the writer's room. I want to say of The Simpsons, but it might be a different. It's in a writing room that's a comedy show, and it's incredible because they just talk about. It's everybody's pitching their stories and they're hilarious and nobody laughs. Like it's got to be like a 10, but also work in this room. It's a pretty fun story, like listening to that go around. And another one that I just heard on Pete Holmes' podcast, he had Conan O'Brien.
Yes.
And Conan O'Brien's kind of this, comic historian, technician type person. And they talk a lot of craft. So, it's kind of a similar situation as like being in a writer's room, trying to generate this material, especially on something like a daily show or a weekly show where it's like, you go on at 11:30 on Saturday, ready or not. There's something to that I find. I love that stuff.
Yeah, that's the other thing that I loved about the documentary was it's just the process stuff. I said it before on this show, man. If you have somebody who, created a new quilting pattern with yarn, if they could speak on it in a fun way, I'm watching. No problem, man. But another documentary.
One more thing on that, Ed. You mentioned Dick Ebersol.
Yeah.
That is a name that comes up in a lot of wrestling history.
Yeah.
Like he's so credited with sort of making WWF like TV prime time friendly.
Yeah. You know what his big contribution is, right? Like with wrestling. Royal Rumble. The first Royal Rumble was a regular network show that he co-produced with Pritchard and stuff, man, to try to like have some big kind of network presence kind of thing, man. So he factored in. That's where you would hear his name a lot with Bruce Pritchard.
I think Saturday Night's Main Event, I think he was involved with as well, which was a big one when I was a kid.
Yeah, that was a network show. That's one of those things, man, where you sort of forget the details, but then when like Jake the Snake goes on Rogan and talks about like the snake biting Randy Savage and shit like that, like this happened one time, but it's so burnt into our brains because when you really think about it, there were like 2 or 3 USA shows, WWF shows, and then there was like the 1 or 2 network shows. There was like one that was on Fox. There was the Saturday Night Show. So it's like they played that clip many times, probably. The other one that was burnt into my mind is when the $1 Million Man tells that little kid if he could bounce a basketball 10 times, he would give him money. And the kid bounces it 9 times and he kicks the fucking ball away from him, dude. Instant heat. Everybody freaking hated him so much, man. Like the dude started to need security and junk like that. That was something that I remembered. And, it worked on me. I was like, oh, he's a real bad guy. Why would he do something to that little dude?
What a character.
The Last Dance, Michael Jordan, the Chicago Bulls documentary, man. Speaking on that type A. What you think about that one?
I am loving it. I don't know how much new information was in that first kind of that setup night, but I am looking forward to every single episode. That was such a big moment for me because I was in high school whenever they were first winning, and then in college on that second repeat, which The Last Dance is covering. And it's great to see it and to see the atmosphere around it once again. because I remember that, like I was a big fan, and I don't know if I ever contextualized what it meant that he had won 5 championships, everybody after him, right? After that team. It's incredible to think that like everyone's gunning for them and they still win. It's pretty shocking because I mean, we haven't seen anything since like that. So it's pretty great so far. I've been thrilled with it. Nice to see him weighing in on it too, and seeing everybody weighing in on it and looking back. It's so far so good. I think that could go wrong with nostalgia and old men maybe bitterly remembering things or misremembering things. But so far, man, so good. I am on board and looking forward to Sunday night.
I think it's pretty clear that it's. I mean, they're padding this thing out 10 episodes, man, and the 2 episodes that are out now, it covers a lot of ground. You know what I'm saying, man? We're talking about Mike when he was a kid and stuff like that, man. So I imagine we're going to go through each championship. I look forward to the Isaiah Thomas stuff whenever Jordan gets punked down and the Pistons strong arm him, and then he has to come back the next year, man, after like lifting weights and changing his whole game. Like, I'm happy to see some of that material, man.
Some of my favorite stuff is sports writing, and I think it's probably deteriorated over time. But like that was a real tradition. I mean, like that's in the tradition of Hemingway. Like there's a rich history there. So I love sports writing. One of my favorite side effects of this new documentary is all the writing that has come up. So like I just read an article and it was about their first championship, talking about going through the years with them, and they lose the first game of the championship series to Magic Johnson and the Lakers, who had won 5 championships. In a way, they're the Bulls at the last dance. And so they win in Chicago, and now they're ahead in game 2, threatening to go up 2-0 against Jordan. They put Pippen on Magic Johnson, and he basically, that's the end of the series. And it's what establishes Scottie Pippen as this absolute dominant defensive force. And really just at that point, the Bulls are untouchable from that point forward. But that move is the move that changes their destiny. And it happens almost accidentally. It wasn't the plan to put Scottie Pippen on Magic Johnson. It was necessity. Jordan got 2 fouls early on, and so they had to do something. And that was the move, and it changed everything. And it's incredible to read like these little, the minutia, like the little details. And in that case, more or less an accidental detail. It wasn't the game plan. It was, we have to improvise because something went wrong.
Yeah, I'm not a sports guy in any strong way or anything like that, man. Like I have my own victories to go after myself, man. So I can't be sitting there rooting for a bunch of millionaires to do their thing. But I am a story guy, and I think that the way that they constructed these first 2 episodes, masterful. Like we'll say that Scottie Pippen was a main figure in the second episode, and at the beginning they sort of like weave a lot of his backstory into his future decisions of like taking the guaranteed money. He went for the guaranteed loot. Why do you go for the guaranteed loot? Well, we established these people in his life, man. Not only is his dad in a wheelchair, but he also has a brother in a wheelchair. His dad had a stroke, his brother got paralyzed. So he has 2 people that he has to take care of, man. So when he's getting, when he sees a number like $18 million over the course of 6 years or 7 years or whatever, man, he says yes. So it's the storytelling that I dig. And I've been harshing on Netflix with their documentaries, doing their kind of like ersatz versions of things. And when I first got it, and I had like those Errol Morris documentaries, the 30 for 30s were on there as well, the ESPN 30 for 30 documentaries, and I watched every single one of those things. I thought that they were constructed marvelously. The basketball ones were my favorite. That's a sport I don't know shit about it, man. When I see those commentators talk about like, did it touch the glass first, and like all this, I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about, man. Like I could give 2 shits, but the storytelling of the basketball docs seems stronger than anything else. And the fun thing about most of those 30 for 30s is that the end boss, the final villain, is always the Bulls, man. It's like these guys, Matt, Shaquille O'Neal and the Orlando Magic, they do this, they do that, but then they meet Jordan, and like that's sort of the end of everything, man. Like you build these promising like little careers, and in fact, what was the Allen Iverson one? What was the big climactic moment that he juked out 40-year-old Jordan and got Jordan to break his ankle and fall to the ground, man? That was all they gave you in terms of the vulnerability of Michael Jordan.
Sports are, I don't know if it's because of the money or what, and it must be, it's to a huge audience, but they're really good storytellers. And I mean, from a technical sense, like you watch a game and they adhere to the 180-degree rule 100%. Like it's these little fundamental things that are foundational storytelling elements that you may not, I'm sure most people watching a game don't think about, but they're all there. Because I mean, think of what's making more money on television, in video, what's making more money in like a televised broadcast of video, sports. So, they dot all their I's and cross all their T's in that regard, to the point that you take it for granted. The guy that's watching a football game on Sunday isn't thinking like it's perfect left, right directional flow. They're not thinking that. But it's there, like it sort of has to be. It has like the rules of the game. Who cares? Things can be misinterpreted and replay, and who it doesn't really matter. It's the storytelling rules that have to be adhered to. As soon as the person watching it at home is confused by which direction are they running, that would be the end of it. It's kind of like the physics real world version of storytelling versus the rules within the game.
There was a bit of that at the beginning of this past year's football season, where the sort of bottom third, I think it was the down marker, like on the bottom third marquee on Monday Night Football, when it would materialize, it came up in like a color that looked yellow. Like I think it was like a fluorescent green or something, but it looked yellow, and it made people think that it was a penalty on every play. It made the audience think that.
Right.
So these people flipped the fuck out on Twitter, like millions and millions of people on Twitter, like during that first half of the game. By the second half, it was a different color.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's a perfect example of how quickly that, how on they are for making sure the product they're selling is being received the way they want it to be. Couple other notes on the basketball thing. The length of it reminds me of the OJ documentary, which I found really compelling, that ESPN did, that I think grew out of the 30 for 30, but then becomes, I don't know, a 6-part or like a 7-hour documentary.
Yeah, it was great.
Pretty interesting. And I heard that part of the reason the Jordan thing is being made now, because they've been trying for 20 years to make this, and they said they just could not tell the story or really they had so much footage, they didn't feel they could really represent those characters clearly in like an 80-minute documentary format. So once the longer documentaries became viable, it became possible to tell the story the way they wanted to tell it. And then the specific guy that's making this documentary also made the Iverson documentary. And whenever he went and met with Jordan, like he had this book of what he planned to do with it, how he was going to tell this story. And then it included like a page of credits at the end, the director's credit, the producer's credits. And the Iverson thing was in there. And Jordan was like, I watched that 3 times. I cried. I love that little guy. And so, like he made that connection too, to that, you mentioned the Iverson documentary, and you're in good taste there, Ed, because apparently Jordan's a fan as well.
When you watch this thing, man, as makers of things, we see behind the curtain a reasonable amount. So it is kind of funny imagining, like, the opening shot when it's Michael Jordan sitting there, and then the camera's like panning in on probably like one of those little tracks, like rolling in and catching him at all these different angles in this like somber kind of pose, kind of like Miracle Man up in that little citadel after the big fight.
Yeah.
And when you see that, it's just like, that's silly bullshit. What I do like though, man, are the little glimmers where you get to see Jordan break kayfabe a little bit, man, and he's using some of those street snaps that I remember from days of yore, man, growing up and shit, like with that little Jerry Krause character, man. Like, yo, what's up, man? Those pills, man, they keep you short. or the diet pills. Like that's that great shit, man. Yo, your mama's so fat, man. When she sits around the house, she sits around the house, man. Your mama's so fat when she wears a red shirt, people go down the street to say, "Hey, Kool-Aid." Like that kind of shit, man. That's that straight up. That's snapping, you know. That's playing the dozens, and Jordan's good with that shit. Like you could watch him in play one-on-one games. Like after he retired, and he would visit the Chicago Bulls gym, like when they were at practice. Dudes would try to call him out, and then he would play one-on-one with them, and you could see these videos, you know, on YouTube, and he knows how to get inside your head. You know what I'm saying, man? My pops was real good at billiards, and would make some loot that way, and he would take me out to play and shit. And whenever I would start doing any good, he would say a couple of things, man, and just get inside my head, and I would fuck up. You know what I'm saying? It's like that's like an extra element to the game, and it was cool seeing that part, man. You know, we didn't get to see too much, but you know, I'm sure he doesn't allow very much to be seen.
I'm looking forward to Rodman. I think he's coming up in one of these next couple of episodes, and from what I've seen about it or read about it, is that he and Jordan, like their relationship was purely on the basketball court. And so I'm curious to kind of like watch some of that unfold, because that's you talk about personas to kind of bring this back to where we started in terms of Cartoonist. Those guys, their personas were so crafted and so giant, so like, especially whenever like Jordan and Rodman, man, that might've been 1 and 2 for persona size in the NBA at the time, to put those guys next to each other. I look forward to that. That seems like that's going to be pretty compelling stuff.
Hey, Kayfabers, I'm curious, man. Who were the two Chicago Bulls that were in the NBA Jam? Because I know they didn't let Michael Jordan in there. It was Scottie Pippen and somebody, but I don't remember if it was Horace Grant era when it came out, or if it was Dennis Rodman era. Somebody will put something in the comments as soon as it streams onto the net, man. But I'm just curious about that, man.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out year for that. Is that like 94, 95?
Yeah, 93, 94, I was thinking, man. But big personalities, we'll take it back to Chaykin. One of my favorite quotes, man. They don't recognize iconoclasm when they see it. Ooh, that's big dick energy, boy. I love it. I love it so much. Talking with Chaykin, the experience that he has, Horace Grant was the guy with Scottie Pippen. Thanks, Punker Mike. I'm inspired to start reaching out to some of the living legends in comics, man. Some of the people that were around for 4 or 5 decades doing work, man. I have my eyes like on like Walt Simonson, and if you have Walt, man, then you have Louise too. I bet she has some good stories, man.
Yeah, they could talk. Certainly, Louise could talk Marvel bullpen, Marvel offices in the 80s. It'd be fascinating to get some stories from that perspective. I mean, that's Jim. She could tell some Jim Shooter stories, I imagine.
She also had that arduous task of writing the Superman comics when they had to fit like jigsaw puzzles into the comic that would come out next week and the comic that came out last week, written by other people. You know what I'm saying? Like just as a writing exercise, that's fun. That's a fun idea, but so is the narrative corpse. And we see how that thing works as a story. That's not. It's an exercise.
I would be curious to hear about that writing setup, because it's about as close to a writing room as comics have gotten. Thinking of like TV, it's common that you would have a writing room, but comics haven't really gotten to that point. Never, they never got to that point. It seems like it would have worked on a book like that.
Yeah.
Where like 4 books, I don't know what the finances would be, but it might support a staff of writers working closely together. But I don't know, maybe not. I would be curious.
I think they would do those retreats,
right?
Like at the 1 or 2 times a year to just kind of like, you each go home with your sentence of like what's supposed to go into this issue and what like you know what I'm saying, man. I'm getting confused by some.
By the way, conversely, how many writers, when we were going through Wizards, would talk about leaving books or hating whenever you'd have your annual crossover, and have to make that work for a couple of months? that would be every issue. If you were writing a Superman weekly in that time period, like it would be like the never ending crossover of having to make everything fit. I don't know, man. It does not sound appealing to me.
Walt and Wheezy, we need to get you guys on the
Yeah,
horn,
they'd be
man.
great. Klaus Jansson's another one who's got that history that goes back to the 70s, and wow.
And he was a teacher. He was a teacher at SVA, so he should be able to talk a little bit, man.
I'm sure. Just hearing the process stuff, like that's something I always like to get into, or tools and process. And Janson, man, is there a process he didn't do? You know, like he could just teach us. It could just be like one of his classes where it's just going through material, all the materials he's ever used, and talking shop.
Heck of a colorist, man. Like whenever you open a book, you could tell if Klaus colored it or not. One of the indicators would be like the word overuse comes to mind, but that's not the right word. Like he would use color holds far more than your average comic. So if there's like a distant cityscape, like, you know, he wants the focal point to be characters that are on top of a roof, you know, in the foreground, and then there's a cityscape in the background. That whole cityscape would be like the blue plate or something, you know what I'm saying? And like you get that in a Klaus Janson comic, but if there's a writer on a colorist on the job, like they're not doing that, you know, like I don't know that they even have the facility to do that in the 80s. It's like, you know, he probably had to do some shit on a piece of tracing paper or whatever. Like that was one of the illuminating things with the David Mazzucchelli artist edition, the Born Again artist edition, when we could see the vellum pieces where he is indicating the color holds and shit, because the way it was done otherwise would be with like a red pen. You know, you would see those old pages and there would just be like a ballpoint pen outline that would be the indicator for the color separator to cut a field of color to contain in that area. You know what I'm saying, man? So they sort of knew the process enough to, you know, put these color holds on separate layers. This is very cool. But Klaus is on my mind. Mazzucchelli is too, because he was also a teacher at SVA. You know, but I want to start digging into. We need to get some prominent indie cats. You know, like I have some people in mind for that. We gotta put our heads together on that shit, man. But
this is now that we add the component of being able to interview people remotely.
Yeah,
it's like we haven't gotten through a fraction of the comics and cartoonists that I want to talk about. I feel like every week we pull out some new cartoonist that it's like, finally we get this person, you know, their work on the channel. It's the same deal with interviewing these people.
Yeah.
Like there's so many people that I would like to talk to about what they've made. So it's exciting, but man, the list is long, Ed.
I'm gonna give a little preview to I'm gonna sell the shoot interview that we're gonna post on Sunday, man. I'll keep it vague, but at the very beginning in the opener, no, here's how I'll say it, dude. I sort of know the daughter of the cartoonist that we talked to in Sunday shoot interview. And because she's a VIP in that way, I let her get a look at the video, man. I chopped it up last night, sent it her way. And she got it, said thank you. 4 minutes later, she hits me up. And she's like, did my dad really just talk about peeing in a mason jar? She's like, I'm mortified. And
That's amazing.
I said, hit play, man, and make note that I don't let our guy flap in the breeze. You know what I mean? I jump right in that foxhole with him, man.
You do. You come through. You don't hang him out to dry, so to speak.
She also said, I wish I could teach him how to find a neutral camera angle because it's a little low. And I said, listen, man, we love this dude. There's no way we would ever we would tell him if we caught a boogie in his nose or some shit like that. We're totally looking out for the cat, man. So that's my sales mechanism to make sure that people watch, dude.
It's a good one. I was very excited whenever we hung up. So I think everyone will be happy with that.
About 2.5 hours long. A great school of cartooning already. Process talk, touch on a little bit of everything in the cartoonist's career. It's fucking fun, man.
These big like career like interview surveys, they're kind of astounding. So many of these cartoonists, the stuff that I'll love about them, it might be 10 years in a several decade career. It's kind of overwhelming.
Who is it though, Jay? You gotta check it out on Sunday, motherfucker.
Yeah, I have books right beside me. I could really tease, but I'm gonna leave those over there.
Man, and we have good interviews planned in the future.
I don't know how much longer you want to go here, Ed. I have a couple of things I want to make sure we mention before we wrap up.
Yeah, do it.
One note I'll say, because we were talking about color, is we talked about Jack Kirby's 2001
Oh,
on
yeah.
a video that went up this week. Good response to that. Really fun to visit that one. But I mention it right now because of the color talk. It's one of the few books that he's credited as a colorist on.
Yes.
The 2001 A Space Odyssey, the movie adaptation, the big oversized Treasury edition, a spectacular looking book and a very unique one. So if anybody, watching us now hasn't seen that yet, I highly recommend it. The other thing that I want to mention before we wrap up, right before we got on here, Ed, he wrote, Shelton Drum made the announcement that Heroes Con is canceled this year.
Right. You know what? I actually hit Shelton up because you got in touch very late today, and I was going to record at 8, sort of no matter what. And I hit him up, and I was just like, "Hey, man, you wanna come on?" And like, he's a guy I want to have on the channel. For one thing, I'm sad I'm not going to get to see him this summer.
Yeah.
Super lucky that we had the opportunity in November to go down to North Carolina and see him, see Seth, see the crew from Heroes Aren't Hard to Find. So that's a positive. But I am bummed out that I'm not going to get to hang out with them. I'm bummed out that I'm not going to get to eat some Mertz soul food and get a carrot cake afterward and all of that sort of thing, man. But he's a guy that we need to get on the channel soon. I think that was going to be a midweek streamer type thing because we're so booked up for like shoot interviews. Do a midweek streamer with Shelton, because there's a lot going on for the retailers now. There's Midtown Comics, which is a big it's a store, is acting as an ersatz distributor for DC Comics. And there's some weird story there. I mean, I just don't know. They must have some kind of warehouse space or something, because the work that I do for Marvel, I get my comps from Midtown.
Yeah.
And if I wanted to like order at like cost or whatever, I would be ordering it through Midtown. So they already act as some kind of like weird distributor. Anyhow, they have some sort of infrastructure for that, man. So he'd be a good guy to get on. And a lot of the retailers, a lot of the smart retailers who've weathered many storms, I need their point of view. And as a maker, and as a couple of guys who are building a little voice here, got to ask the question, what can we do? How can we help, man? What the heck can we possibly do to help the situation?
Yes, I agree totally. Everything you said there, Ed, from the quality of Shelton and his crew, volunteers and employees. I don't know if anybody has any of these answers, but it would be great to give him a platform to talk to people and just tell us all what he's seeing right now.
Yes. The mailbag episodes that we did yesterday, I say episodes, but it was really like one kind of gargantuan enterprise, man. I want to give shouts out to Darren M, who sent us a couple 100 pounds of comics.
Yeah.
Certainly during the tenure of the show, might have sent a legitimate ton of comics in terms of pounds. He definitely.
Yeah, I wish we would have kept track.
He definitely sent tons of comics as single issues, like he sent us tons that way, no doubt, man. But shouts to Darren M for sending us a bunch of comics for the grab bag episode. I also want to shout out to Alika Seki of Maui Comics, man, from Hawaii, who sent a bunch of manga our way, man. I hit him up a little bit earlier after we sort of divvied up the bounty, and I told him, man, whenever I'm not cutting kayfabe videos and whenever I'm not inking eviscerations and whatnot, I'm gonna be reading some of that manga.
Yeah, I have boxes of it. I look like a hoarder at this point with what I've brought home from those mailbag episodes. But it definitely is. It's keeping me. It's keeping me in reading material for sure. It's been amazing the diversity of what has come in. I was telling you, Ed, I've got a dozen issues now of Shoujo Beat. It's a comic that I looked for a long time and had no issues of. And just like in the last 2 months, I feel like I've gotten a box full of them. So, wow. Yeah, lots of comics to read.
You know what? I'm just making a note here because that's what this is, man. This is the roundtable. This is for us to debrief, and I find some inspiration in this, man. I'm gonna hit up some of my Japanese homeboys, like I have 2 or 3 translators, and I'm gonna see if we could get some international shoots where they act as translator. I've done it before, like with cartoonist Ghetto Hollywood, who's really awesome but isn't known here because he's sort of new to the manga game. But I hung out with some cool cats, and I missed a meeting or two. If I was out there a little bit longer, I would have been able to make some time with some very, very famous and important cartoonists. I'm going to try to swing some shoot interviews with mangaka, man. It might require us to be up a little bit later, or shoot the episode a little bit later. You know what I'm saying? Like when it's midnight, it's like
We've
1 p.m. there or something.
done some weird hours.
Yeah.
So do what you got to do, man. Whenever I was doing the podcast, I remember we recorded, I want to say it was an Australian person, and it was like some weird like 4:30 or 5:30 in the morning, and with a third party. So it was like this whole, you do what you got to do.
Alika, like the Hawaii thing is interesting because that's a 6 hour difference, and that's 6 hours going like that way. So I think the jet lag's probably brutal. And I say that because we were invited to the Maui Comic Con, which is supposed to take place in October, but I don't know that I'm gonna go, man. I'm gonna see how this virus stuff plays out over the next couple of months. But I'm definitely keeping to myself longer than is suggested, kind of thing. You know, like whenever they're like, okay, we're gonna reopen things with certain rules applied, I'm still gonna hang back and let everybody else be that canary in the coal mine and see what the fuck happens, man.
Yeah, it's going to be a weird luxury that we have as people that work from home. As the work, as people start to return to work, it's like we do have that point of view of, well, and now I'm just watching more cars go by outside the window and see what happens. I don't know. We still may be a ways off. It's so hard to tell.
You know, it is fascinating though. Every time I go to the grocery store, so since the shit hit the fan, I've been to the grocery store 3 times, and every time I go, it's there's some new piece that they kind of like imagined to like make the flow better and to kind of keep people separated a little bit more. So like the very first time I went, there was tape up like every 6 feet, like just like a little piece of electrical tape every 6 feet at the checkout aisle. The next time I went, there was like a sticker, like a decal that was created and printed telling you to stand there. So it was like a more professional looking piece of tape, basically. And there was the little plexiglass that was kind of like protecting the poor cashier a little bit. So when I went last week, the new change was like one lane.
That was going to be my that was my contribution of what I've seen. I don't know how many people were there when you were there, Ed, but the people in my grocery store seemed unable to do the one-way thing. I guess they were only going one way, but they weren't following the taped the arrow directions.
You know, here's my strategy, and it seems like, for as infrequent as I go, like they must recognize this is a Raiders hat. I usually fly the pirate flag uh, when I head out there, man. But the security guard guy sort of recognizes me. But I am dude number one who gets in that door after it opens up to the plebs, man. You know what I'm saying? I'm the first dude in, because I just let me go in, let me be fast, let me get my shit, let me get the fuck out of there. Um, I Someone asked me yesterday, the day before, man. We were talking Brendan McCarthy, and she was like, she was like, uh, like I already have my Mad Max outfit ready to go, like when shit hits the fan and stuff. And she's like, what would your gear be like? What would your persona be? And talking about my Red Room comic, like, would you be like that poker face dude with the football pads and all that, or one or two other characters? And I was like, you know what, man, I'm the first to go. Like, if this shit hits the fan, I'm toast. I'm like a domestic kitty cat, and you don't understand how upset and mad I was that I had to get generic giant eagle paper towels instead of Bounty. And for the first time in many years, I got like those like hormone ridden eggs that the plebs get. You know what I'm saying, man? Like, I'm used to where my free range eggs that like have beautiful, bright, almost orange yolks. I haven't cracked open one of those like basic eggs in a long time. Dude, it just looks sick. It's like this like translucent, barely yellow yolk. And I cracked those things open and I'm just like, I feel like I'm about to hurt myself eating this thing, man, but that's all I could find. So I was like, dude, you don't want to look to me as any kind of protector or anything like that, man, because once I have to start using corn cobs for toilet paper or whatever the fuck, I'm not going to be a happy camper. Because that's the thing, dude. Like I'm still good. I'm still good. And, whenever I came back from Japan, when we shot that Kayfabe Weekly, the joke I was going to make was as soon as I landed back in America, I ordered a Japanese robot toilet. And it's true. So I don't have the toilet paper issues that most people do. But, you got to dry off. And since the damn zombie apocalypse began, I haven't seen a toilet paper pack that you can buy. I haven't seen it. I haven't laid my eyes on a pack of toilet paper in a month. I haven't seen it in the store. You know what I'm saying? So what's going to happen? I don't know. It's a source of anxiety. I'm still good for a while.
Hopefully things don't get too much worse.
I was kind of like floating.
Thought we were trending up for a little bit, but you're starting to scare me now, Ed.
I was kind of, and she said the same thing. When I was going through all of that, I was hoping you'd be like, oh, well, I saw some toilet paper, but I could see that you're just, where the stash is, man, and you're hoarding it for yourself.
We have gotten toilet paper since things went wrong. So,
well, let me ask you this, man. When you got it, like, what could you have gotten some more? Like, was there?
You know what? I think they actually cap that they don't want you buying a bunch of them, but there was more there.
Yeah. You know what, man? We should cut this thing out because our screen is going crazy.
All right.
So here's what we're going to try to do, Jimmy. We're going to try to end the show in our... No, that didn't do the trick. Here, let me try this again. Kayfabers, we're using some new technology. All right, let's see how this goes. No, that's not very good. Is this us? Is this us? Move. Oh, yeah, it is. Speak.
Yes.
Okay, good.
It's us.
Okay.
So we're still here.
So here's what we're going to do, Kayfabers. Like, let's try to close this thing out in our traditional fashion, man. So what I'm going to say is to all the Kayfabers out there who have subscribed to the channel, thank you very much. We appreciate it. But we are on the road to 20,000 subscribers, man. So, let's see. Like, subscribe, and follow the YouTube channel. Hit the bell icon so that we can notify you when the next videos are available. And hit the... Did I say hit the bell, Jim?
You did. It's my turn.
Yes, it's your turn.
You can subscribe to the Cartoonist Kayfabe e-newsletter at the links below this video. You can find Cartoonist Kayfabe t-shirts and merchandise and baby bodysuits at the link below this video. And I say that because right before we went on, we sold one of those. So somebody has a really fly looking kid out there.
Are you talking a onesie?
Yes.
Dude, that's the second onesie we sold, man.
They're flying off the shelves.
All right, man. We're gearing up to finalize this thing. And look, I blew the spot already. Jimmy, give them their marching orders. We got to get the fuck out of here.
Read more comics.